Nestled in the urban jungle of London, the British Museum quietly protects some of the world's oldest and most valued treasures. As the world beyond the museum keeps ticking, visitors get lost in the worlds within its walls. The British Museum is one of the most highly frequented museums in the world, with over 6 million visitors a year. It houses over 8 million works and one of the largest collections of art and history known to man. The collections span all continents, which means there are endless ways to explore any topic of interest or point of knowledge when you visit. Honing in on one topic can help you bring depth to your experience. The British Museum opened to the public on January 15, 1759. Today, we are going to map a maze in the British Museum to whittle down the overwhelming collection of treasure to just a few gems that relate to the topic of communication. Though you could go on a pilgrimage to view objects randomly, I'm going to take a journey approach. Today, I'm going to travel the world from the ground level up. The museum layout is by continent, but I'll present the artifacts from the collection in a chronological order, so you don't have to. Let's get traveling. In early Mesopotamia, Sumerians developed writing for mankind. They began by writing on clay, using pictures until they eventually developed cuneiform in 3000 BC. The Epic of Gilgamesh, written in 2100 BC, is the earliest surviving complete work of literature which came out of Mesopotamia. Many early forms of cuneiform and art depict the story in various ways, such as this head of Humbaba, a beast that Gilgamesh slays in the story. Calligraphy, or the art of writing, is written in vertical columns and is read from right to left. This scroll depicts scenes from the Odes of Chen and was recorded in the Classic of Poetry, which dates back to 1000 BC. The Classic of Poetry is the earliest collection of Chinese writing. This stela adorned a chapel in 1900 BC. Over the years, many visitors scribbled their own doodles on its surface. The stone was painted red to resemble wood, which was a rare material in Egypt at the time. Hieroglyphs were used for ornamental writing. For daily use, hieratic was more popular. In the next room over, this stela gets much more attention. Every day, hundreds of people huddle around the Rosetta Stone to get close enough for a photo. The Rosetta Stone, dated back to 196 BC, was discovered in the 1790s in Egypt during a Napoleon raid. The British took it after kicking Napoleon out and brought it untranslated to the British Museum. It appeared to have 3 different languages etched onto its surface. Thomas Young translated some of it. He found that the symbols on the top could be translated to those on the bottom. Francois Champion finally cracked the code. He used Coptic, which has symbols similar to ancient hieroglyphs. The Rosetta Stone was preserved because it fell face down in the sand, otherwise it would have faded away with time. Without this stone, we wouldn't understand Egyptians. This wall panel, dated back to 640 BC, shows a scene of an Assyrian campaign in southern Iraq where Assyrian soldiers led prisoners through date palms. At the far left, the heads are counted and the booty is piled in front of 2 clerks who are recording the details in a book and on a scroll. Writing was an invaluable tool for maintaining records of important events in war and politics. In ancient Greece, the drama culture flourished in 700 BC. Greece, especially Athens, boasts the invention of legendary plays. Euripides, born in 480 BC, wrote plays such as the Bacchae, Medea, and the Trojan Women. He was a master of irony and drew many in with his plays. Athenians would have watched performances of his plays in Acropolis, the high city, built in 448 BC. It was home to the theater in the Parthenon, which had many friezes and statues depicting the favorite figures of the plays, available to view at the museum. Athenians were familiar with the gods and goddesses, such as Poseidon, Athena, and Venus. Many plays featured the cunning god Apollo, who had a temple dedicated to him in Greece. Back to Egypt. In ancient Egypt, writing played a big role in arranging tombs for the dead. Texts were important in bringing about the transition from death to new life. They included prayers and hymns to the gods, the words of rituals, and spells to equip the dead. They also contained instructions which would enable the deceased to pass guarded gateways. These texts were placed in the tomb with the body. This document, from a hieratic Book of the Dead papyrus, dated back to 300 BC, was used as a guide in positioning amulets on a mummy. The Cyrus Cylinder, dated back to 550 BC, describes King Cyrus's peaceful capture of Babylon in the year 539 BC and how he rebuilt the main temple there. It is written in cuneiform and is one of the most famous historical documents of the Achaemenid Empire. Referred to as an early charter of human rights, it was placed in the foundations of Babylon's city wall. Without modern mass media, Romans used inscriptions to publicize laws, decrees, and calendars. They also used them to record the dedication of statues or buildings, honor the gods, and commemorate important events or people. The most common inscriptions are dedications on funeral monuments, which give us important information about daily life and social status, such as these from the 2nd century AD. Inscriptions had symbolic importance. If an emperor fell from favor, inscriptions mentioning him were often defaced or destroyed. The British Museum houses the National Collection of Western prints and drawings. Don't miss this tucked-away room on the upper level, which showcases some of the best. The first prints on paper were made in Europe around 1400, using hand methods that hardly changed over the next 400 years. From the invention of the printing press, a new industry developed. This engraving and letterpress depicts the execution of Charles I, though not entirely accurately. This is dated back to 1649. The press that revolved around Charles I's execution was somewhat ironic. During his life, Charles I maintained commitment to the divine right of kings. He thought journalism was dangerous, and used the Star Chamber to order newsbooks to cease publications in 1632. When he died, journalism lived on. Now for a coffee break. A coffee shop is a hub of communication, and in 18th century Europe, it was a vital place to exchange news and information. This one is no different. With an open format across from the bookstore, visitors sit down to discuss what they've seen and learned so far. At times in British history, coffee shops were the only place to find accurate news and information. High taxes and royal regulations often made attaining a newspaper a difficult feat. For those spreading ideas that might have been considered libel if published, a coffee shop was a safe place to evade trouble and the prying ears of spies. Thanks for exploring with me. I hope you didn't get too lost. Until next time, cheerio!